There's a kind of power that doesn't need to shout. It doesn't beg for validation. It doesn't show off with chains or flashy status. And it doesn't chase likes on a screen. It simply exists. When it enters a room, you feel it. Not because it's loud, but because it's silent. That cold stillness, that unshakable presence, the kind of energy that makes people sit up straight without knowing why. It's the aura of someone who has faced chaos, wrestled it, and come out sharper, calmer, deadlier. A person who doesn't need to prove anything, because their discipline speaks louder than any words ever could. That is the mind of a true warrior. Not the fake toughness people perform online. Not the puffed-up confidence built on fragile ego. But the terrifying stillness of someone who has already conquered himself. Someone who is unreadable, unshakable, unstoppable. And in history, few embodied this more than Miyamoto Musashi. He wasn't just Japan's most legendary swordsman. He was a ghost in human skin. Over 60 duels, never defeated. And the way he won wasn't through brute force. It wasn't luck. It was psychological dominance. He broke his enemies long before his blade touched theirs. This video isn't about comfort, manifesting, or chasing happiness. It's about something far darker and far more powerful. It's about how Musashi built a mind so disciplined, so focused, so dangerously calm, that people didn't know whether to fear him, admire him, or worship him. Because once you understand how he forged that mind, you'll realize the same path is open to you. The question is whether you're strong enough to walk it. The monster was forged, not born. Most people like to believe greatness is a gift, that the men who carved their names into history were prodigies, chosen from birth, kissed by fate. It's comforting to think that way, because it excuses weakness. If you weren't born special, then you don't have to face the responsibility of becoming dangerous. But Miyamoto Musashi wasn't born with a golden sword in his hand. He wasn't raised in comfort. He wasn't destined to be a legend. He was forged, brutally. His story begins in loss. His mother died when he was still a child. His father, a strict martial artist, left him to wander, and Musashi grew up without the shield of family, without warmth, without safety. He spent nights in the woods, sleeping in dirt, surrounded not by affection but by silence and survival. Where other children played, he fought grown men. His very first duel ended in blood. At an age where most kids are just learning how to write, Musashi learned how to kill. That wasn't childhood, it was war disguised as life. But here's what separates him from almost everyone alive today. He didn't play the victim. He didn't spend his life blaming the world, begging for pity, or crying out for sympathy. There were no excuses, no self-help groups, no endless complaining on the battlefield of life. There was only the brutal recognition of reality and the choice to either collapse under it or rise above it. Musashi rose, and he rose alone. One of his most famous lines captures the heart of his philosophy. Do nothing which is of no use. Think about that for a second. Every time you scroll mindlessly, every time you drown in distractions, every time you tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, you're feeding weakness. You're doing what is of no use. Musashi had no patience for that. His entire existence was an obsession with mastery, not comfort, not popularity, not fitting in, just mastery. And that obsession meant walking a path so brutal it would destroy most men. He walked it without companions, without applause, without encouragement. Because here's the truth that no one wants to hear. Greatness is not built in the spotlight. It is built in isolation. Alone in the woods, alone in silence, alone with the thoughts that most people run from their entire lives. When you are cut off from the noise, you're left face to face with the real enemy, yourself. Not your critics, not your circumstances, not the world. Your own weakness, your own fear, your own self-sabotage. And Musashi stared those demons down until they shattered. Where another man would go insane from loneliness, Musashi grew sharper. Where another man would drown in despair, Musashi built discipline. The monster wasn't born, it was carved, one scar at a time. Childhood loss, isolation, constant combat, all of it stripped him of softness and left only steel. He became a blade disguised as a man. And this is the first lesson in building a terrifying mind. Stop expecting comfort to shape you. It never will. Comfort makes you fragile. Isolation hardens you. Discipline sharpens you. Pain shapes you into something the world cannot break. That's why Musashi terrifies even now, centuries later. because his life reminds us of something we all secretly fear, that power is forged in suffering. And suffering is the one thing most people spend their lives running from. But Musashi didn't run, he embraced it, and that decision to stare reality in the face instead of hiding from it was the first step toward building a mind that could not be conquered. But that wasn't the end of his transformation, because once you've stripped away comfort, once you've accepted isolation, the next enemy shows up, and it's far deadlier than any opponent on a battlefield. Kill distraction or be killed by it. There's a reason most people never become dangerous. It's not because they lack talent. It's not even because they lack discipline in the physical sense. The truth is simpler and uglier. They drown in distractions. They mistake scrolling for strategy, dopamine for direction, noise for progress. And the terrifying reality is that distraction doesn't just waste your time. It kills you slowly, one stolen hour at a time. Musashi understood this centuries before glowing screens hijacked attention. In his era, distraction meant death. Imagine stepping onto a dueling ground, blade in hand, facing an opponent whose only goal is to carve you open. One thought out of place, just one moment of hesitation was fatal. If your mind drifted for even a breath, you weren't just losing focus, you were losing your life. That's why Musashi sharpened his attention like a weapon. He refused to let noise into his head. Every moment was war. When he wrote the Book of Five Rings, he wasn't trying to inspire anyone. He wasn't writing cute slogans for people to tape on their mirrors. He was creating a war manual, cold and surgical. One line in particular rips straight through excuses. If you know the way broadly, you will see it in all things. Think about that. Most people try to fix their lives like patchwork. One habit here, one diet there, one productivity hack after another. But without a code, without a unifying way, everything collapses. Musashi didn't dabble, he didn't patch. He devoted himself to a single way, a single code, until every part of life bent to it. Fighting, training, thinking, breathing, everything became one flow, one edge, one way. And here's where it cuts deep for us. Today, distraction is more lethal than any duel, because it doesn't just kill you once, it kills you every single day. Every time you sit down to work, and your phone steals your focus. Every time you compare yourself to strangers online instead of mastering your craft. Every time you trade hours of life for noise that leaves you emptier than before. That's not harmless, that's suicide of potential. I know because I lived it. There was a period where I was drowning in distractions, convincing myself I was busy while achieving nothing. My mind felt scattered, weak, always comparing, always consuming. And then I found Musashi's words. I realized I wasn't losing to the world, I was losing to noise. Every scroll, every excuse, every pointless hour was a duel. And I was losing all of them. So I made the choice Musashi would have made. Eliminate the noise. Delete what steals your focus. Burn away everything that isn't part of the way. After that, I treated every hour like a duel. Not some casual hobby. Life or death. Win or die. And when you approach life like that, everything changes. The edge sharpens. The mind hardens. You stop reacting to every notification, every opinion, every fleeting emotion. You move with clarity. Less noise, more edge, less emotion, more precision, less reaction, more control. And suddenly, you start to see the truth. Distraction isn't harmless, it's the most dangerous enemy you'll ever face. Because it doesn't attack you with violence, it seduces you with comfort. And comfort kills more warriors than swords ever will. That's why Musashi terrifies even now. Because he understood what almost no one today understands. If you don't kill distraction, distraction will kill you. It will rob you of time, of focus, of life itself. But eliminating distraction was only one part of Musashi's code. Once you cut away the noise, you face an even deadlier opponent. Not the world, not other people. Something far closer, far harder to defeat. Emotion is the enemy of execution. Distraction is deadly, yes. But even when you silence the noise outside, there's another battle waiting inside you. And this one destroys more men than distraction ever could. It's the war against your own emotions. Because if distraction scatters your focus, emotion hijacks your execution. Think about it. How many times have you known exactly what to do but didn't do it? You had the plan, you had the skill, you had the timing, and then in the critical moment you froze, or you raged, or you panicked, or you hesitated. That's not lack of knowledge. That's emotion strangling execution. And it happens to almost everyone. But not to Musashi. He understood what most people refuse to admit. Emotion is the enemy of mastery. His philosophy wasn't about suppressing feelings for the sake of being cold. It was about refusing to let emotion outrank focus. When he stepped onto a dueling ground, he wasn't calm because he didn't feel fear. He was calm because he trained until fear had no authority. He didn't beg, didn't rage, didn't fantasize. He moved like a blade, direct, precise, final. One of his lines captures this perfectly. The primary thing when you take a sword in your hands is your intention to cut the enemy, whatever the means, simple, ruthless, clear. There's no room in that sentence for hesitation, doubt, or emotional theatrics. Your hand, your mind, your body, united under one intention, execute. Now compare that to today. Most people's emotions own them. Someone disrespects them, and they spiral into outrage. They face a setback, and they drown in self-pity. They're so fragile that their entire day can collapse from a single comment. That's weakness. That's why so many fold under pressure. Not because they lack skill, but because their emotions scream louder than their discipline. Musashi trained until his mind was quieter than his breath. That's why he terrified opponents. He didn't need to shout or posture. He didn't even need to move fast. His silence was unsettling because it made enemies realize something. They couldn't read him. They didn't know what he was thinking, and when people can't predict you, they start fearing you. His restraint was scarier than rage could ever be. And this isn't just about swords, it's about life. How many opportunities have been lost because someone couldn't keep their cool? How many relationships destroyed because someone reacted instead of responding? How many dreams abandoned because fear whispered louder than clarity? Every time you obey your emotions, you betray your potential. True mastery isn't the absence of feeling, it's the refusal to be ruled by it. Musashi's discipline created a mind that moved without hesitation. That's why he could walk into duel after duel, outnumbered, underestimated, and still win. He didn't waste time negotiating with doubt. He didn't let panic rewrite his plan. He executed relentlessly. And that's the lesson most men today need to hear. If your emotions still run the show, you'll never move like a warrior. You'll choke when the moment matters most. You'll flinch when you should strike. You'll panic when you should hold, and every time you do, you hand your opponent victory before the fight even begins. Control emotion, and you control execution. Control execution, and you control outcomes. And once you control outcomes, you don't need to talk about power, you just become it. That's why the men who master themselves radiate an aura that terrifies without a word. Because deep down, everyone else knows the truth. Emotions own them, but nothing owns you. That was Musashi's real weapon, not just his sword, his mind. Cold, silent, strategic, and once you've mastered your emotions, there's only one enemy left to face, the final opponent, the one no man can avoid. Face death. Become untouchable. Most people live like they're immortal. They plan for tomorrow as if tomorrow is guaranteed. They chase safety, comfort, and approval because they secretly believe they'll live forever. And that illusion is why fear controls them. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure, fear of pain, fear of losing status, fear of looking foolish. It's pathetic when you see it clearly. Grown men paralyzed by shadows. Musashi wasn't like that. He broke fear at its root. How? By facing the one thing everyone runs from: death. He meditated on it daily, not in a poetic abstract way. Literally, he imagined being struck down in combat. He imagined his body broken, his name forgotten, his life erased. And he embraced it. He didn't just accept the possibility of death. He welcomed it into his training. He stripped death of its power by rehearsing it until it lost its sting. He wrote, "The way of the warrior is resolute acceptance of death." Read that again. Resolute, not reluctant, not half-hearted, total acceptance. Because once you accept death, you stop fearing it. And when you stop fearing death, you become untouchable. Think about how many decisions you've avoided out of fear. That opportunity you didn't take because you were scared of failure. That risk you didn't face because you were scared of rejection. That confrontation you backed down from because you were scared of judgment. Every one of those moments was death in disguise. Not physical death, but death of potential, death of honor, death of growth. Fear killed you before life ever had the chance to test you. Musashi couldn't afford that weakness. If he hesitated, he was dead. If he panicked, he was dead. If he let fear whisper, "What if you lose?" he was already lost. So he trained until fear itself was irrelevant. He fought with the freedom of a man who had already made peace with dying, and that's why no one could break him. Imagine the power of that mindset in today's world, moving through life like a man with nothing to lose, decisions would become sharper, risks would feel lighter, failures wouldn't crush you, they'd teach you. Rejection wouldn't paralyze you, it would sharpen your edge. You'd stop living like a civilian and start living like a weapon. That's what made Musashi terrifying. It wasn't just his skill with the sword, it was the realization that he wasn't fighting to preserve his life. He had already surrendered it. His opponents were clinging desperately to survival. Musashi was free. That imbalance crushed them before blades even touched. Now ask yourself, what would you build if you had already accepted the worst? What could you do if the fear of loss no longer dictated your every move? How much stronger, sharper, freer would you be if you lived as though death was already behind you? That's the lesson Musashi left us. Stop running from death. Stop pretending you'll live forever. Make peace with the inevitable, and you'll find something even greater than survival. You'll find power, because when death no longer terrifies you, nothing else can. And once you've embraced that truth, you start to see the world differently. You stop chasing fragile comforts and start seeking the kind of discipline that outlasts pain, fear, and even mortality. Which brings us to the next lesson, one that slices directly into the softest part of modern culture. Modern weakness disguised as self-care. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Most of what's called self-care today is nothing more than escapism, dressed in soft colors. Take a break. Be gentle with yourself. Protect your peace. These phrases are repeated like holy mantras in a world terrified of discomfort. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll see the ugly reality. Most people don't want growth. They want anesthesia. They want to numb themselves, not sharpen themselves. Musashi would have laughed at this idea of self-care, not because he rejected peace, but because he knew peace isn't something you protect, it's something you earn. He didn't achieve inner calm by running from difficulty. He achieved it by walking through fire, bleeding, fighting, and enduring. The silence he carried inside him wasn't handed to him. It was forged by suffering. Think about it. Your mind doesn't grow stronger by avoiding stress. It grows stronger by mastering it. Your spirit doesn't harden by hiding from pain. It hardens by standing inside it, refusing to break. Yet today, weakness has been rebranded as wisdom. People convince themselves that comfort is healing, when in truth it is erosion. Every skipped challenge, every avoided fear, every excuse in the name of self-care carves away at potential until there's nothing left but softness. Musashi said, "You may abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor." That line shatters modern illusions. To him, your honor, your code, your discipline, your strength was worth more than comfort, more than safety, more even than life. To betray that code for temporary ease was the real death. And yet that's exactly what most people do every day. They abandon their honor for a few minutes of scrolling. They trade discipline for instant pleasure. They betray themselves in the name of balance. Look at the culture around you. People want the strength of warriors but not their scars. They want the wisdom of philosophers without the solitude. They want the peace of monks without the sacrifice. They want to post the aesthetics of discipline online but live the reality of distraction. Everyone wants to look like Musashi. No one wants to live like him. And that's why weakness is everywhere. Because the path of Musashi, the path of real discipline, requires you to embrace suffering, to choose difficulty, to go where it hurts, not where it soothes. That doesn't mean reckless self-destruction. It means deliberate hardship, training when you're exhausted, working when you're uninspired, facing rejection instead of hiding from it, forging your mind on the anvil of pain until nothing can bend it. Self-care that makes you softer is poison. Self-care that makes you harder, that's the only kind worth practicing. The cold shower that teaches you resilience, the discipline of shutting down distractions, the choice to pursue silence instead of noise. That's how peace is earned. That's how Musashi lived. The bitter truth is this: the world has glamorized fragility, and fragile men will never walk the path of power. Musashi knew there was no shortcut, no safe route, no soft alternative. You want strength, you earn it. You want clarity, you suffer for it. You want peace, you fight for it. That's the lesson most people refuse to hear. That's why they cling to slogans and quick fixes, because the path of the warrior is too heavy for them. But if you can reject the softness, if you can abandon modern illusions, if you can embrace the fire instead of running from it, then you will carry something terrifying, a peace no one else understands, a peace carved out of war. But Musashi's path didn't end with suffering. He went deeper, into a place most men fear, the silence inside themselves. And what he found there was even more powerful. Create inner silence, or be a slave to noise. Most people today are terrified of silence. They can't sit in a quiet room without reaching for their phone. They can't walk down a street without headphones in their ears. They can't eat a meal without a screen flickering in front of them. Noise has become their drug, and like all drugs, it enslaves them. Because when the noise stops, the voices inside begin to speak and they're too weak to face them. Musashi was different. At the peak of his life, after 60 duels, countless battles, and an undefeated record, he withdrew into silence. He didn't chase applause. He didn't bask in fame. He didn't even seek students to carry on his name. He retreated into a cave, alone, to write, to train, to think, and ultimately to die. And here's the terrifying part. He didn't fear the silence. He became sharper inside it. Why? Because Musashi understood that silence is not emptiness, it's a forge. It burns away illusions, excuses, and weakness until only clarity remains. When you strip away the constant stimulation, you come face to face with your own thoughts. Most people panic when that happens. They try to drown out the discomfort with entertainment, chatter, or endless distraction. Musashi ran toward it. He let silence tear him apart, then he rebuilt himself stronger. And this is why most modern men will never carry Musashi's power. They can't be alone for 5 minutes without unraveling. They need noise, they need scrolling, they need constant stimulation to protect them from the one thing they fear most, themselves. But until you learn to sit with yourself, until you can face the chaos in your own head, you'll always be a slave, not to the world, not to other people, but to your own noise. Silence trains the mind like nothing else. When you strip away stimulation, your focus sharpens, your thoughts stop scattering and begin aligning like blades. Your emotions lose their grip, and what's left is clarity, a fortress inside your head that no one can breach. That's why Musashi's stillness was so terrifying, because it wasn't weakness pretending to be calm. It was calm built on the corpse of chaos. And here's the truth. Inner silence is the rarest form of strength today. Anyone can shout, anyone can posture, anyone can post a motivational quote. But the man who can sit still, unreadable, impenetrable, that man holds real power. Because silence unsettles people. They can't predict it. They can't manipulate it. They can't control it. And what you can't control, you start to fear. Musashi's final years in the cave weren't retreat. They were ascension. He left the world not as a man running from life, but as a warrior who had mastered it. His silence wasn't escape, it was dominance in its purest form. Because when you no longer need the world's noise, the world no longer owns you. So ask yourself, can you sit in silence? Can you put down the phone, shut off the music, ignore the distractions, and face your own mind? Or do you run from it like everyone else? Because if you can't conquer silence, silence will conquer you. Musashi proved it. Create inner silence, or be a slave to noise. And if you fail that test, you'll never stand in the storm without breaking. Because silence was only preparation for the final lesson, the one Musashi lived and died by.
Be the storm, not the branch. Life will break you. That's not pessimism, it's fact. Plans collapse, friends vanish, betrayals cut deep, opportunities slip away. And when the storm comes, most men snap like branches. They bend under pressure, twisted in desperation, and eventually split apart. That's the fate of the fragile. But Musashi was no branch. He was the storm itself. He knew the brutality of life firsthand. His childhood was loss. His youth was combat. His manhood was endless challenge. He lived through betrayal, hunger, loneliness, and the constant shadow of death. And yet he never broke. Why? Because he trained his mind not to cling, not to depend, not to seek safety. He cut through illusions with the same precision he cut through enemies. He didn't need reassurance. He didn't need approval. He didn't need comfort. He moved through reality like a blade, clean, sharp, undeniable. This is the difference between ordinary men and warriors. The ordinary man prays the storm never comes. The warrior becomes the storm. The ordinary man waits for rescue. The warrior accepts no one is coming. Musashi's entire philosophy can be distilled into this: clarity over comfort, precision over panic, purpose over pleasure. When the wind howled and chaos closed in, he didn't flinch, he didn't beg, he didn't break. He stood calm in the storm because he was the storm. Look at today's world and you'll see the opposite. People collapse under the smallest gust. A single rejection sends them spiraling. A single failure crushes them. A single betrayal convinces them to quit. They break because their identity is built on fragile things: external approval, shallow comfort, temporary success. Musashi built his identity on something untouchable: mastery. and mastery cannot be broken. That's why even centuries later his aura terrifies, because he embodied a type of power we barely recognize anymore. Not loud, not boastful, not theatrical, but still sharp, unshakable. And when someone like that walks into a room, you feel it, not because they're trying to intimidate you, but because you see something you've lost in yourself. You see a man who cannot be broken. This is the ultimate test of Musashi's code. Not skill with the sword, not physical strength, but the ability to remain unmoved while the world collapses, to face betrayal with clarity, to face failure with precision, to face death with calm. And when you do that, when nothing outside can shake what's inside, you stop being a branch, you become the storm. And here's the final truth. People will fear you when you reach that point, not because you're cruel, not because you're violent, but because you've become unreadable. They can't control you, they can't manipulate you, they can't scare you. And when people can't understand what drives you, they assume the worst. They assume you're dangerous, and they're right, because nothing is more dangerous than a man who cannot be broken. That was Musashi, the undefeated warrior, the silent storm, the man who showed the world that true power doesn't come from force, it comes from clarity, discipline, and presence. And if you walk the same path, you'll carry that same aura, the kind that unsettles, inspires, and terrifies all at once. But Musashi's legacy doesn't end there. His story closes with a truth even sharper than his sword, a lesson about the one thing no one can ever take from you: the blade within the mind. The world is full of noise, everyone shouting, everyone performing, everyone desperate to be seen. And yet, in all that chaos, the rarest thing isn't power, money, or fame, it's silence. The kind of silence that terrifies because it's not emptiness but control. Musashi carried that silence. He didn't need to prove himself because he had already proven himself where it mattered, inside. Look back at his life and you see the pattern. The monster wasn't born, it was forged in hardship. He stripped distraction out of his world until nothing remained but clarity. He killed emotion's grip so execution could flow unhindered. He faced death until death lost its teeth. He rejected weakness disguised as comfort and earned peace through suffering. He embraced silence, not as escape, but as a weapon. And finally, he became the storm, unbreakable, unmovable, unstoppable. This is why Musashi still stands as a ghost above history. Not just because he was undefeated in over 60 duels, but because his mind was sharper than any blade he ever held. He didn't conquer enemies, he conquered himself. And that's the kind of power that doesn't fade with time, doesn't rot with age, doesn't vanish with death. It's the kind of power that lingers in memory, haunting those who glimpse it. And here's the lesson that should unsettle you. Your money can be stolen, your reputation can be destroyed, your body will decay, everything external can be ripped away. But your mind, that fortress, that blade that belongs only to you, that is the one thing no one can ever touch. Unless, of course, you hand it over willingly through distraction, emotion, fear, or weakness. Musashi teaches us that the true battlefield is internal, that every duel begins long before the blades are drawn, that the enemy isn't out there, it's in here, in your excuses, in your fear, in your noise. And once you kill those enemies, the world itself becomes lighter. People can betray you, mock you, underestimate you, but they can't break you because you've already faced worse within yourself. Imagine carrying that presence. Imagine walking into a room without saying a word and people feel it. Not because you're loud, not because you're pretending, but because you radiate the calm of someone who has nothing to fear. That's what Musashi embodied. That's what terrifies people even more than skill, the silent recognition that you are untouchable. And here's the choice that sits in front of you now. You can keep running from discomfort, numbing yourself with noise, clinging to fragile comforts, pretending weakness is self-care. Or you can walk Musashi's path, strip away distraction, master your emotions, face death in the eye, choose suffering over softness, embrace silence, become the storm. And if you do, you will carry the kind of mind that doesn't just survive life, it dominates it. Because in the end, Musashi wasn't teaching us how to hold a sword, he was teaching us how to become one. Cold, sharp, unbreakable, the blade within the mind. So let the world keep its noise, let others chase validation. You have a different code now. Build a mind so strong, so still, so dangerous, that when the world looks at you, they can't decide whether to fear you or to follow you. And in that silence, in that deadly calm, you'll smile, because you didn't just survive the storm, you became it.